Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Melbourne Traditionalists podcast, episode 32. I'm Mark Moncrief from Upon Hope, and I have with me David Hiscock from XYZ. How are you, David?
Very good, Mark. It's good to be here. I've got a word for you. You know how we have to now start referring to the Aborigines as First Nations people. Now, when it comes to people who are whacked out, crazy, off their rocker, the expression is now neurodiverse.
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 Yeah, I don't think that's going to catch on because we just both mispronounced it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's too hard. Apparently, we have to change our attitudes towards neurodiversity.
Well, that's what we're always told, isn't it? That we need to change our attitudes.
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't think it's happening.
No. It's if anything, my attitudes are hardening towards neurodiverse people.
Yeah, I must say my attitudes have hardened quite a lot too.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, I have had a very interesting weekend. I drove up from Melbourne to New South Wales to attend my brother's wedding.
Beautiful.
So,
it's a good drive, isn't it? I love the countryside.
Yeah, and it was particularly good because I got my sister to drive. So I just got to sit in the passenger seat and relax and enjoy the scenery.
Yes.
Yeah. And we actually talked most of the way there and most of the way back, and hey, we didn't have an argument. It was great.
Their family's good.
Well, we're both very strong-willed people, so we once we have an opinion, we have an opinion.
Well, I guess given that she was driving a fast-moving car, you have an incentive to agree, don't you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yes.
Now, what I wanted to talk about today was the wedding was great. It was about 40 people there, and they were in a small town where my brother had lived for a number of years. And very interesting, we arrived in the town, and I thought one of my nieces still lived there, but she doesn't. And we went to this cafe and we ate, and then afterwards I found out that cafe was my brother's house. That's where he actually lived. So I had lunch at my brother's house and I didn't know it.
Lovely. At a cafe?
At a cafe, yeah.
Okay.
And but one of there was a number of interesting things that happened, not necessarily exciting for other people, but one was, and it relates very much to what we talk about. I was talking to a guy who I've known for a while, but I don't get to see him that much. And he was saying, he's very much on the conspiracy side.
Oh, yes.
All right, so he was talking about...
My kind of guy. Yeah.
So he was talking about Admiral Byrd being in the Antarctic and UFO bases and things like this. All right?
Yes, absolutely.
And which I don't have any truck for, but all right, fair enough. And but he also said, I used to have to bring up these subjects to people. I used to have to talk about, the government. How bad's the government? How bad's Agenda 21, and all these kinds of things. And he says now people are talking to me about them.
Yes.
He said I don't even have to say anything. People will just start talking about it. And then he started talking about how a lot of guys are like, when are we going to do something about this? And I said to him, individuals can't achieve that much. It's only when we're organised that we can actually start to achieve things. So we, it's a wedding, so, other conversations took place and, people moved around and so forth. But it was amazing that you go to even a wedding and our talking points are there.
Yes. Well, you're in the country for starters, so people are more
Although
likely
he comes
to be
from the
based.
city.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
The internet has normalised a lot of stuff that used to be fringe. In particular, YouTube pre about 2018 has normalised a lot of things that used to be fringe. It's the thing about the internet. Like you might be the only one of the group that who talks about things, but there might be 2 or 3 other guys who would talk about it, but they're too scared to. And then you find out that there are hundreds of other people who have been talking about this and talking about it for years, and then you look in and you find them on the internet, and then you see just how many people have watched that YouTube video, and all of a sudden it's not so crazy. Neurodiverse. yeah. So there's that aspect, like the internet has helped us understand just how many people are out there who are like, hang on, there's actually something going on here. In terms of like mistrust of the government, from what I understand, like when they sort of give official stats, like that percentage of people who actually trust the government is going down, and the percentage of people who distrust the government is going up. So there's big dissatisfaction with the government. And from there, as we're always talking about how to organise everybody. The challenge can sometimes be, how to group everybody. You're going to get the people who are wanting to talk about chemtrails and flat Earth, and then you're going to get that people in with that big net when you're sort of talking about anti-government activism.
And that's true. Yeah. And that's true. And then another thing that I talked about with my sister was we were talking about recycling and the big scandal that is recycling in Australia.
Yes.
How we've been told for 30 years that we absolutely must recycle, and there's this whole recycling industry that exists, and then
over in China,
and then it's come out in the last 2 years that the recycling industry is the garbage industry in Malaysia and India and China, and actual recycling, no, that doesn't really take place at all. So today I heard on the radio the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison's opening a new recycling plant, and really? He said that 25% of our recycling is actually recycled.
It's which basically says the whole thing is a scam.
And we were also talking about how in Victoria, I may have mentioned this a couple of months ago, about how there were these big fires over the last decade. There have been these big fires and in Melbourne, and people will be told, stay indoors, it's all toxic and so forth, and they're all recycling fires. So basically the local council comes and collects your recycling. They take it to a warehouse where the warehouse just keeps growing and growing and growing, and then at some point it catches fire. Toxic smoke is billowed into the neighbourhood, and it takes a week for the fire brigade to put the fire out, and it just keeps happening. And the media reports on it, but they don't investigate it.
Yes.
And finally, it's actually come out in the last 2 years exactly what's been happening, and all this time we've been kept in the dark.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I love the way that you sort of prefaced this last bit of information with the first bit of information, talking about conspiracy theorists. But you've got to ask the question, cui bono, who benefits out of that. Interestingly, the Victorian government just this week or last week has announced that we're going to have more bins that we have to put all of our stuff into.
My sister was actually part of the trial.
Oh, really?
So she's got 4 bins now. She's got a rubbish bin.
Yeah.
She's got a recycling bin.
Yeah.
She's got a green waste bin. She's got a purple bin, which was for glass.
Okay. So was part of the trial like you put everything in those bins, and then one of those bins you set on fire, and then the other ones you tip in the ocean? Because that's what happens, isn't it? That's actually what happens. 75% of it.
Well, traditionally we send it to another country and they tip it into the ocean.
And then they tip it into the ocean. Yes. Yeah.
So it's just been a disaster, and of course there's another message that goes around Facebook, which has created a bit of a stir, is they banned plastic bags in Victoria.
Yeah.
So if you want a plastic bag, you actually have to buy one.
Yeah.
So I've bought all these plastic bags, and then I go to the supermarket, and of course I've forgotten my bags. So I buy a whole new bunch of bags.
I do exactly the same thing, though. Yeah.
And then, so now I just try and just grab as much as I can carry, and I just carry it to the car. And they always say, you be careful with that. Are you sure you don't need a bag? And
and then you throw an apple at them.
But of course, nearly everything that we're buying is encased in plastic.
Yeah. That's the irony there, isn't it? We're not allowed to have plastic bags to hold the things, but they still case everything in plastic.
Yeah. So
again, it's virtue signaling. It's just another bin to put stuff in before they either burn it or tip it into the sea.
Yeah. So we're constantly told this, but it shows you how the government isn't governing.
Yeah.
Because government means managing, and they're not managing. They're not actually making these decisions. They're not, if they were serious about this, and this includes the environmental industry, and it is an industry, if they were interested in this, they'd concentrate on the packaging.
Yep.
They'd start right at, at the farm gate or the factory gate, and then they'd worry about what happens at the end. Yes. But instead, it's what do we do with the rubbish?
It's just another.
Well, we shouldn't have created it if we didn't want to deal with it.
Well, let's just tell people what to do a little bit more, because that always works. Yes, that's essentially what they're doing there. It's we don't really have a solution, but we'll just crack down on people's freedoms just that little bit more. Yeah. So it was a very interesting weekend. I had I thought it would be a politics-free weekend, and I was a little bit dreading that because I'm a little bit addicted, and but hey, it wasn't. Yeah, what I love is that it seems that people was pretty much on the same page there.
Yeah, and it was about how you approached it, not the actual topics.
Yes, well, because and that gets to the heart of the matter. That gets to the heart of what you talked about a couple of weeks ago in your discussion of the Viet Cong. It's what we discussed a week before that, and quite a number of pieces on the XYZ have been going up about this, and I've noticed other people talking about it as well. And so it's we are past the stage of these are the issues. This is what's going on. We've got a whole cadre of people now have been red pilled on everything. It's okay, what do we do about it? Yeah. Interesting.
So you did notice the Viet Cong episode. You just used the right word, cadre.
Cadre. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yes, comrade. So interestingly today being I think the 2nd of February, 2nd or 3rd, the 2nd of February. March, yes, March. Vox Day, obviously Vox Day is talking to the Z-Man again, or is at least reading him because he's quoting him again.
I should point out to our listeners, because I realised we did this a few weeks ago. Yeah. We talked about events happening in the future that by the time they listen to it will have already happened in the past. Right. And what happened over Christmas, New Year is we actually, because we were on holidays, we actually came in and we recorded a whole bunch of episodes. Yeah. So what we've done is we're actually a week in advance. Yeah. So when you listen to this, we actually recorded it a week ago. Yeah. So that explains why the dates are all over the place.
Yeah. We might do something like that. We could have I think episodes of XYZ predicts the future, but that does happen. I'll mention something at the end. So this is This is the Z-Man just talking about optics. Fundamentally, these splits are over presentation. The optics side cannot fathom why the hardcore cannot understand the need to make a good presentation. The hardcore cannot understand why the optics guys don't see the dangers of compromise. Both sides are right, but both sides have always failed. The hardcore ends up in something similar to a cult, and the optics guys get gobbled up by the system. There really needs to be a different approach to this in order to avoid a repeat of the past. So Vox Day makes a great point in response to this. He says, the reality is that every successful movement requires both its extremists and its moderates.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So Sinn Féin and the Irish Republican Army, or the Palestine Zionist Executive and the Irgun. In this case, the core problem is that the moderates face... so in this case, what we have today, the core problem that the moderates face is that no matter how flawless their optics might be, their position simply isn't a viable one. Like communism, like socialism, like secular humanism, civic nationalism has been thoroughly tried and tested. And it has failed, even more spectacularly than these other ideological catastrophes. So I guess what I take out of that is the difference between the moderates and the extremists now needs to be different presentations of ethnic nationalism. And I think what's occurring on the XYZ in a lot of these discussions is we're going, okay, how do we package ethnic nationalism and what do we do about it? Yep. And we need to learn from the left, which
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, we keep making this
Yeah.
point that the left has a lot to teach.
Yes, and one of those important ones is that we don't disavow.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And just understanding, okay, like, you know, the hardcore guys understand, okay, we need those moderate nationalists. And the moderate nationalists understand, okay, those hardcore guys, they might be a little bit scary, but they're not gonna do anything crazy.
Yeah.
And they're our guys. So that's what I take out of that. I think it's great.
No, I absolutely agree. And I also think that, you know, when you look at the left, you notice, and you'll see this on the news, there's been some, you know, there's some protest, you know, and there'll be these crazies out on the street. But they protect their crazies.
Yeah.
They look after them. They make sure that if they get in trouble, there's lawyers to help them out. You know, there's, you know, they give them bus fare so they can actually get to the protest and, you know, and so forth. They always make sure. And this is the thing, and this is one thing that our side has not paid enough attention to, is that their crazies exist for a purpose. They actually harness them and they unleash them.
Yes.
They actually unleash them. They're not an embarrassment to them. They actually are a part of their arsenal.
Yeah, it's kind of like they have this line, hey, don't let us sick these guys onto you.
Yeah. And it works. You know, a lot of people don't want to go. If we are called a rally, a lot of people, ordinary people, wouldn't want to go because they're like, I don't want to encounter those kinds of crazy people. Right? So they have that purpose. But also, Mark Richardson of Oz Conservative.
Oh, he's crazy. I mean, he's neurodiverse.
Actually, I would not describe him like that at all. He's recently written an article last week about a woman who wrote an article about surrogacy now.
Oh, yes.
And basically what she's saying is that she's a feminist, and she's saying that, you know, women shouldn't give birth to their own children. They should give birth and somebody else should look after them.
Oh.
Right?
I think
so
they
every
tried
mother
that
becomes a surrogate.
They tried that in communist China, didn't they?
And yeah. And
the feminists have been advocating that for years.
Yeah, and the destruction of the family. And basically it's liberalism taken to its logical conclusion, because that is the logical conclusion of the system we live in. And so he's basically written about how these, you know, this is crazy. Well, it is crazy.
Neurodiverse.
But it's entirely logical. And the reason that they publish this stuff is because they're always pushing.
Yes.
They're always just inching forward and normalizing the most bizarre and the most destructive ideas. You know, so, you know, everyone on the right seems to know that there's going to be a push to legalize pedophilia.
Yep.
All right? And most people who have thought about it realize that starts with the destruction of marriage. And then it goes to homosexual marriage. And then it goes to polygamy. And then eventually there won't be any lines. So why are you criminalizing this behavior when it's not an issue, it's not a problem?
And then they retcon it and they say, it's amazing that we had to talk about this for so long to make it to make this a normal thing.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. But actually, I've also noticed that a lot of people are really starting. Pedophilia is really a hard line for them to cross, and for most ordinary people, it's just so beyond the pale that it really is politician lamppost rope. Some assembly may be required time.
Yeah, don't disavow.
Yeah. Now, I have an article here from the Herald Sun, Monday, February 24th, so it's 2 weeks old, or a week old, and it's entitled Class Clowns, and it's talking about people who have graduated from teaching courses. And what's happened in universities is that before the 1960s, you really had to be in the top 5, maybe top 10% of students to get a place at a university. And now, in the 1960s, university exploded because they wanted to provide jobs for the middle class. And that helped lead to the radicalization of our society, because it protects all these, what did you call them?
Neurodiverse.
Yeah, neurodiverse people.
Yeah.
And so basically, to keep people there and to keep unemployment down, they've just lowered the scores that people need to get into university. So I know people who have got into university, and teaching is one of the courses where they got 60% of the score that they, out of 100.
Yep.
That's a long way down from 10%, from 90% that you would need in the past. So the quality of teachers has gone right down, and we all know that, right? If you've met them, if you've seen what they're teaching, and I'm not saying teaching, all teachers are stupid or it's not necessary or anything like that, because teaching has actually become a much harder profession than it was, because there's a lot of nonsense work that they have to perform.
Well, yes, our education, the curriculum is basically, now it's basically butt sex, enviro porn, and Holocaust studies. I don't know how they fit anything else in.
If you want to teach those, then you can teach exclusively those things.
Yeah.
But most teachers, even though they're leftists, most teachers actually do want to try and teach real subjects.
Yeah.
But the education system itself says, you have to include this in that subject, you have to include that in that subject. Yeah. So every subject becomes politicized, and it depends on the teacher exactly how political, because some really go for it and some just completely ignore it, and some say, I'm supposed to mention this, so I will, and I'll move on.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
But because the quality of teachers has gone down, the federal government has said, when you graduate from your teaching degree, before you become a teacher, you have to do a test to prove that you actually know the English language and grammar and things like that.
You're not neurologically diverse.
I'm not sure whether it's really concerned with that. I think if you were, they'd still let you do it.
Actually, we have to change our attitudes.
Yeah, that's right.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mostly you, not us.
Yes.
I'm cool. And anyway, so you made me lose my train of thought.
See what I did there?
So people are taking this course. So they've been to university. They've done a 3-year course, and then they've done an additional year of teaching. So that's 4 years of university education, and they're failing the course. They're failing this test, right? And people are wondering, well, how can that be? All right, and it's a good question. But I think there's two. Well, obviously, we already know one of the reasons is that people aren't as good as they should be.
They're letting in the dummies.
Yeah, they're letting in the dummies. And secondly is that people can come from overseas, qualify to take part in the course, as in they're Australian citizens, but their command of English is terrible, and they're failing the course. And people can do the course, or the test, I should say, multiple times, and they're failing multiple times.
Okay.
Right? Okay. But this is, again, like the recycling issue that I talked about before. They should do this test at the start.
Yep.
Before they've done anything.
It would save people 4 years of their lives, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it would save the taxpayer money, and it would save wasting their time, and but this is how it is, because the purpose of the test is trying to correct what's that? 6 years of primary education, another 6 years of secondary education, 3 years of a university degree, and then a teaching degree. That's 16 years of education. Who needs 16 years of education?
Yeah, nobody. I teach kids, and quite a lot of them, boys and girls, they'll often get to 15 or 16. And my observation will be that they don't need any more schooling. They shouldn't be in school.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
And I got to a stage when I was 16 where I was like, they're not teaching me anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm not learning anything,
Yeah.
I should not be here.
And on the flip side, I'll often have like some of the more brilliant students. They shouldn't be doing all of the other things either. They shouldn't be required to do half a dozen subjects. They should be allowed to specialise early.
Yep.
Yeah. With teaching, it's a little bit like the sales job of the job seeking world. Like when you're unemployed and like and you go on to Seek or whatever the latest job search engine is. It's very easy to apply for sales jobs and very easy to get them, but it's actually an extremely difficult thing to do. Very, very few people are actually very good salesmen. And so it seems that teaching seems to be like they're funneling the dummies into teaching, but teaching is an incredibly difficult thing to do. I've been doing it for over a decade, and I only consider myself to have been really good at it for the last few years. I figure at the least in my early years I did as little harm as possible. It's basically it's really tricky. You need good people to do it. The people who are expecting to educate the next generation are the products and the victims of our current education system. And there's that problem, really. Like the education system as it is, I think, needs to die.
I agree, and I think that the real problem is the university sector. And teaching should be like being a plumber. It should be an apprenticeship.
Absolutely. Yes.
You know, everything is hands-on, because I actually did a teaching degree, and a lot of people dropped out when you actually had to go and visit a school.
Yeah, it would have been good for them to have to do that in the first 6 months. Yeah.
No, in the first
week,
probably the first week, maybe first month. For the logistics, but first of all, you go there and you just observe.
Yeah.
And a lot of people drop out because they're like, oh, I sort of imagined it being different.
Yeah.
Even though every one of us has been to school.
Yeah.
But then secondly, to actually stand in front of a group, that's very difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And especially teenagers, because it brings up all those feelings you had. Oh, I remember when I was 13 and I didn't want to be noticed at all. And now I'm the center of attention and everyone's looking at me. And it brings up all these insecurities and for a lot of people, they just can't handle it.
It hits them, my own experience from... my memories from high school, I remember seeing that happen to a few of the teachers. Most of the teachers I had were brilliant. But I remember a few of them, they sort of just fell apart. There's a reason I only teach one-on-one and not to a group. Can you imagine me getting up going, "Hello class, my name is Mr. Hiscox." The last 2 minutes. I'm very proud of my family name.
Could you use a pseudonym like Hercock?
No.
No.
And just getting the kids to use my first name just wouldn't have the same weight. So.
Well, I agree. When I was at school, some teachers would say, "Oh, call me Dave." And it never felt right. It never felt right. But of course, I learned when I went into teaching is that what people, it doesn't matter what you say, call me. They call you sir or miss.
I like that. That's what I do like actually. Yes. So it's good. Yeah. Just one more thing, just on predicting the future. Just one last little tangent.
All right.
So there's a song by Katy Perry called "I Kissed a Girl," and I liked it. Yeah, you remember the song? It came out about 15 years ago or so. And so I heard it the other day, and I was listening to the lyrics, and there's this song, there's this bit, "I kissed a girl and I like it. I kissed a girl and I liked it. Hope my boyfriend don't mind it." And there are some other lines kind of like that. And so it occurred to me, I should write an article, a fake news article saying that Katy Perry now disavows her earlier song because it's heteronormative. And so I was going to write it, and then I looked it up. I was just, hang on, let's just see what people say about it. And sure enough, she actually disavowed the song last year or the year before. It's already happened. She's already said, look, I would actually write that song differently now because I realise that there are lyrics in there that are now considered to be heteronormative.
So and again, it goes back to what we were talking about with the crazies.
Yeah.
Is that they're always pushing the line.
They're always pushing that line.
Always pushing. And why
line.
did she include that stuff about my boyfriend? Because the song isn't about lesbians. It's not directed at lesbians. It's directed at straight women going, hey, experiment.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll like it.
Yeah.
And don't worry, your boyfriend, he won't mind.
Yeah. And it's always thinking about what happens 10 years down the track.
Yeah. And then, of course, things have moved on and she's like, oh, I can't believe I was so, even thinking about a girl having a boyfriend.
Yeah, that's it. So I used to define satire as fake news that will be real news in 3 months' time. I now define satire as something which I think might be funny, but then I find out that the left has already done it.
Well, I hope that you do write that article still, because it's it's a very nice, neat lesson on how things are working.
Yeah, the slippery slope is real, people.
Liberalism is the slippery slope.
Yeah, that's it.
And talking about Katy Perry, she was on the radio today.
Oh, yes.
She's apparently going to do be one of the performers for the bushfire appeal up in Bright.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, I hear we used to burn witches. What's that? Yeah, sorry.
Now, David, where can people find more of your thinking?
Come to xyz.net.au. Some people in the live chat the other day, they were trying to take the piss. And, no, we're not afraid of Gab. We're on Gab as well. So come visit us on Gab or on Telegram too.
And I'm Mark Moncrief, and you can find more of my thinking on Upon Hope. And some of you may have noticed that there have been clips going up every day, and they are old articles of mine from the start of my blog, Upon Hope. And basically I've been doing something that I've wanted to do for a number of years, and that's record them and put them up. And some of you have really found those useful, and so I hope that more of you get to have a chance to listen to them and learn some things. Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Goodbye, everyone, and have a good week, and see you next week.